Welcome to channel. Today, we explore story filled with unexpected twists. Please, subscribe and like to stay updated. Let's begin. My wife Diana sat across the breakfast table from me, as she had for the previous 24 years of our marriage. The morning light shone through the window of our breakfast nook, revealing the golden and brown tones of the leaves in our backyard. It was early December, and fall had quietly arrived, throwing a tranquil enchantment over the usual rhythms of our empty nest, a life we'd settled into during the last 2 years since our youngest daughter married and moved away. Diana looked out into the backyard with a tranquil face, drinking her coffee and admiring the scenery as I read the morning paper. This was our unconscious cadence, broken only by short interactions when one of us was drawn to an intriguing narrative. As I switched to the next page, my gaze fell on an article about a guy discovered dead in a cheap neighborhood hotel. Something about it piqued my attention. I read the story carefully, taking in the information, and then paused when I saw the name, one that struck an unsettling connection. The description of the dead was sketchy but hauntingly similar, and I couldn't escape the suspicion that it might be someone we knew. I reread the passage, my mind rushing to connect the connections. The man's age, history, and location all seemed reasonable, but only one person knew for certain. He had been Diana's old colleague, a name she hadn't mentioned in years. I folded the page and glanced up at her. She was still looking out the window, lost in contemplation. Softly clearing my throat, I responded, "Diana, I need to ask you something. Did you hear about the man who was found dead in that motel? His name, it might be someone you used to work with." Her brow wrinkled slightly as she focused her attention on me. The tranquil cadence of the morning had altered, and I readied myself for whatever her response may be. According to this article, a man was found dead in a hotel room last night. His name was Liam Turner. Didn't you used to work with a Liam Turner, dear? Diana made a squeak as she inhaled sharply. Yes, a few years ago, but it might not be the same person. She tried to remain cool. The paper says he was 30 and lived across town on Birch Avenue with his wife and 3 kids. Does that sound like him? Yes, it does, she said, looking little apprehensive. Does it say how he died? She inquired hesitantly. Yes. He was in room 32 of the Twilight Lodge, you know, that sleazy rent-by-the-hour motel. He was tied to the bed, castrated, and had his genitals shoved into his mouth. The police think it may have been the work of a jealous husband, but they're not ruling out. Diana covered her mouth with her palm and dashed from the kitchen to the restroom. I had a smug look on my face because Ethan had gotten what he deserved, and Diana was reaping the feelings that arise when it seems that a former lover of yours has been brutally slain. My thoughts returned to our shared history. We met right out of college. I went out with some pals at a pub, and she was there with some of her friends. Diana wasn't the most attractive of the group, but she was far from the most ugly. My friends gradually linked up with her group, and we ended up conversing, which led to more. 17 months later, we married. We enjoyed a typical marriage, with a few ups and downs, a boy, Daniel, after a year, and a daughter, Olivia, 2 years later. They are both married. Olivia lives 50 minutes away, while Daniel lives an hour and a half away in the other direction. We lived our lives, making time for baseball games, basketball games, piano lessons, and other extracurricular activities. Because none of the kids qualified for a scholarship, we are still repaying their student loans and will be for the next 5 years, keeping us on a restricted budget. Diana and I didn't have jobs that required a lot of travel or overtime, so we knew where each other was, because we were generally at home with the kids, doing activities as a family. So here we are, and Mark, 42, Diana is 41, and we're still in good health. She claims I look better today than when we first met. I believe the same about her, since the few pounds she put to her curves went to all the right places. Only a week ago, on Thursday, I was searching through the trash drawer in my wife's dresser, seeking for the sewing kit to repair a seam in my lucky bowling shirt, when I came upon a red leather-bound book. It said Dear Diary on the cover, and I couldn't believe Diana was still keeping a journal. I was curious whether it included the moment we met and what she said about me. I warned myself that it may not be very flattering, since I was more in love with her than she was with me initially. I was surprised to see that the date at the top of the first page was May 15, 2016, only 3 years ago. My interest piqued. I started reading. Her younger English colleague, Liam Turner, had been flirting with her a lot. She was apprehensive that he was attempting to seduce her, but said, "That will never happen." She added that as a mid-40s woman, it made her feel youthful and desirable again, and she had no idea how much she needed that type of excitement in her life. She stated that the reason she kept this journal was because she wanted to tell someone about it but couldn't. Several of her girlfriends had boasted about over-the-boundary flirting to her, and she always punished them harshly for ever contemplating flirting back, knowing how quickly these things spiral out of hand and result in an ugly divorce. Obviously, she couldn't confide in her spouse about this, hence the journal. She vowed herself to keep it light and never let things get too serious. Over the following several weeks, she bemoaned that her children no longer needed her, and that things would only become worse after Olivia married and went away. She also said I was as uninteresting as looking at a photo of an albino cow in a snowstorm. She said that I had lately joined a Thursday night bowling league, and that she hardly noticed when I wasn't there. She moaned that if this was all she could look forward to in life, she'd go insane. I glanced up from my book and rhetorically inquired, why didn't she say anything to me? I had no clue it was this horrible for her. I'll have to think of something to liven things up a little. Then I returned to reading, and my emotions shifted from empathetic and sorrowful to furious and hurt. She started to justify how a one-time romance with Ethan would liven up her life. She said that I may benefit as well. She had other reasons, which were, of course, simply methods to rationalize doing it, but just one. Finally, she concluded that if she was extremely cautious and quiet, she could carry out this evil crime for our benefit without being detected. They arranged and agreed to meet at the Twilight Lodge, room 32, after their afternoon off. She had all these beautiful ideas about how things would turn out after being led down the road to marital ruin by a silver-tongued, seasoned player and wife seducer. Reality had prepared a harsh shock for her. We don't live in a spotless house. We were the neighborhood house where all the kids gathered to play. Our house was generally filled with toys, video games, sports equipment, and whatever they were up to that day. Of course, the kids would pick it up, but maintaining the community playhouse clean would have required too much time away from our family. We were clean, but not as clean as Mr. Clean. Room 32 of the Twilight Lodge, which was probably 25 years old, fell well short of our standards for a clean hotel room. Diana instantly became concerned about pests and if the bedding had been changed after the prior tenants. She was really precise and informative about this experience. As Ethan started his physical seduction, Lush drove all of those ideas from her head. Soon they were nude and having sex. When she became completely thrilled, Ethan began to speak. I bet old Mark can't screw you this way, can he? She didn't sure what to say, so she ignored him and focused on being more thrilled to boost Ethan's ego. That feels so good. Keep doing it. Ethan wouldn't be refused. Mark doesn't do it for you anymore, does he? Mark does fine. Let's not talk about him right now. If poor old Mark did it for you, you wouldn't be here with me, would you? No, you'd be at home in bed with him. I bet he can't even get his little tool hard anymore, can he? Please leave him out of this. He'll start feeling guilty. You can feel guilty later. Right now, you're mine, sexy, and I'm screwing you like you haven't been screwed in years. To emphasize his point, he pounded her numerous times. Ethan understood this to suggest that she had joined the Let's Disparage the Hubby bandwagon. That's right, baby, I'm screwing you like Mark never could, and you know it. Diana was hearing what he said but was more focused on her own desire, absent-mindedly repeating, never could. He heard her response and stepped it up another level. When we do this next time, we should do it in your bed and let Mark watch to see how a real man satisfies a real woman like you. He'd just sit there and play with his little pencil when he saw what I'm packing. I'd make him get us drinks between rounds of screwing your brains out. I might even make him wear a maid outfit if you did good. Ethan screwed her hard. Diana was so taken aback by his words that she lost all enjoyment and became uneasy thinking about his nasty fantasies about Mark. As he hurriedly slid off of her, she stood up to go to the restroom. Was it good for you, babe? He said dreamily. It was, until you started talking about Mark. If you ever talk about him like that again, they'll bust your balls so hard that they'll make Humpty Dumpty's fall look like a five-piece puzzle. You have disappointed me in so many ways this afternoon. She looked for words. Let me make this perfectly clear for you. You are never getting your hands on me again. You will never speak a word to anyone of this regrettable episode either. If you do, your wife will hear about this, and I happen to know that you'd have more to lose from a divorce than I do. Think about how much child support is for 3 kids for the next 10 to 12 years. She'd have the house on Birch Avenue, and you'd live on Birch Avenue. I can't believe that I risked my marriage and happy life for you. She slammed the door to the bathroom, where she hastily washed up and dressed. If she needed any more proof of how inexpensive this apartment and her affair were, the screams of the lady in the next room could be heard through the walls as she begged her lover to go deeper. She wondered whether they heard Ethan chase Mark down. She went home, washed, and wept for the remainder of the day. When Mark returned home, she writes, he inquired why she was so upset. She blamed Olivia's departure after the forthcoming wedding. She felt awful about lying to me, but she couldn't tell me how she had breached our vows, especially because she had received so little in return. She said that she received what she deserved from the affair and promised that she would never do it again. She couldn't bear the notion of how badly she may have injured me with what she had done. She swore to turn over a new leaf and be a better wife to me in any manner she could think of, including the occasional BJ. She said that she hadn't given me one in about 3 years. Pretty close. We stayed at the Royal Palace's deluxe suite for our 20th anniversary. She was going to be more attentive and prepare my favorite dishes more frequently, even if I'd never understand why. She was going to make things up to me. I thought, how great. The woman who cheated on me is making up for it, and I have no idea why. I recalled how she was so wonderful to me, as she described, during the tumult and months leading up to Olivia's wedding. When I congratulated her on it, she said that she got caught up in the romanticism of the wedding and wanted me to know how much she loved and valued me. The dishonest bee was only trying to alleviate her guilt. At least she learned her lesson. Or did she? I read on. As the worried husband that I am, I folded the paper, placed it on the breakfast table, and went to check on her. She was seated on the side of our bed, holding a tissue. So I can assume by your reaction that it was the same guy? I didn't think you knew him all that well. How close were you? I questioned, twisting the knife slightly. He was just a guy that worked with us for a while. He wasn't the nicest guy in the office, but he didn't deserve that kind of death. I was thinking of his wife and kids as well. They didn't deserve that. From what the article implied, he was a serial cheater, and the list of suspects is as long as your arm, if they can ever find them all. What they didn't deserve was a father and husband like that. Now his wife can find a real man to care for her like I've cared for you and our kids all these years. I stressed the words real man, and the shudder she produced as I uttered it indicated that she understood what I meant. Since you seem to be all right, I'm off to work. I bent over and kissed her on the cheek, since her head was still bowed and she couldn't look me in the eyes. For the first time in a week, I walked into work with a cheerful bounce in my step. Isn't karma AB? Diana observed my light feet as I walked away and made a mental point to keep a closer check on me, wondering whether I knew anything about their affair, if you can call that one afternoon fiasco an affair. It was Sunday morning again, and we had gradually returned to our normal. I no longer noticed Diana's sidelong looks at me when we watched the boob tube for many days following the incident last week. Several more leaves had fallen from the trees in our backyard. Diana offered this observation. The weather is supposed to be good Monday, so you need to get some of those leaves raked up before they get too deep. I agree, I responded, sitting down in my chair and picking up the paper. I already had it on my schedule this weekend. How was bowling last night? It was late when you got home, and I was too tired to stay up any longer. I did okay, with a 225, 178, and a 231. We won by only 3 pins, so we held on to second place. Sorry about it being late, but it was Tom's birthday, and we stayed to have a few beers with him. I unfurled the paper, and at the bottom of the front page, there was an item about another guy who had been discovered dead. The headline was, "The serial killer was feared." I rapidly examined it with great curiosity since it was extremely similar to the one from last week. Geez, I can't believe that it happened again. Listen to this. They found another man killed similar to your friend. This time he was found in his apartment, though. He was castrated again, and this time they shoved it up his butt. What do you make of that, dear? That's terrible. Did this guy have a family? She worriedly questioned. No, he was a single guy named Ryan Brooks. He lived close to where you work, on Willow Drive. Did you know him? She made a wild rush for the porcelain throne. I smirked again, maybe larger this time, but no one noticed. As I proceeded to read her journal, she described more of what she did to feel better after her affair, and then remarked that since I was completely unaware, she should back off before raising my suspicions. She therefore had a lot to write about as the wedding neared. Shortly after the wedding, the posts grew more humdrum and irregular, with just 2 for the whole month of September. I was almost about to give up when they mentioned another chap. He was complimenting her after their divorce, which I noticed, but she didn't. Perhaps he was slower and more delicate than Ethan had been. Yes, Ryan Brooks entered my wife's life, and after less of a fight with her conscience this time, because she had gotten away clean and paid her dues. He was first mentioned in early November, along with how youthful and attractive he made her feel. He even brought her a flower for her desk on many occasions. She warned him that if she didn't inform everyone that Mark had sent it to her, rumors would spread. He was okay with that. She earned them, regardless of who received credit for sending them. Smooth scum-sucking. By Christmas, she had decided to meet him for a one-time affair at his apartment. He lived close on Willow Drive, and they could get there for a short lunch without taking any more time off that she'd have to account for later. This time, he was attempting a lengthy affair, so he went all out. He had rose petals on the bed, nice music playing, and candles blazing in his dimly lit bedroom. He took longer to seduce her than Ethan, and her first climax occurred when he screwed her. She had 2 more climaxes before he finished, and they just made it back to work on time. She reminded him that it was just a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but with much less resolution than she had the previous time. I glanced up from the wretched book. She used the phrase, made love. They didn't fool around as she did with Ethan. Instead, she made love to him. I was already irritated and perplexed by her going into a second lover, but this screwing stole the cake. He persisted in his attack on what remained of her chastity, and 3 days later, on a Tuesday, they repeated the act. They met again the following Thursday, but this time it wasn't as romantic as the previous 2. This time, he requested that she give him a BJ for the second round. It felt like it was over much too quickly for both of them, but he was young, at 25, and he knew he could pick it up again. However, given their tight timetable, blowing him off would be faster. She reluctantly did it, and it seemed a bit cheaper for the experience. But I had 4 climaxes before returning to work that day. She said that if you give a little, you will get a little. It became a regular occurrence at successive sessions. On their 6th date, he requested if he could have her from behind. She swiftly and firmly refused, saying she had never given it up for anybody and wasn't going to start now. Nathan thought the BJ thing worked the second time since he was so insistent about it. So he reasoned that a little force would enough to get his desired result. While they were together, his acts grew more sudden and unexpected, leaving her feeling unsure and uncomfortable. Despite her early complaints, she finally attempted to accept the position, which was far from ideal. The event left her feeling distant and empty, like an object of enjoyment rather than a collaborator in the moment. Reflecting on how she felt afterwards, she concluded that their dynamic was not one she wanted to continue and opted to break up with Nathan the next time they met. She went on to say that what was meant to be a brief romance had turned into a full-fledged affair, which she regretted. But she didn't regret the relationship or the amazing sensations she experienced during their first few encounters, until he became dominating and obsessed with doing things from behind. In her shame, she admits that she pondered offering her ass to Mark as part of the atonement process, but she was afraid that doing so would make him suspect after forcefully denying it for all these years. She remarked, "All ITLL take this time would be a couple of BJs and one of my famous meatloaf dinners, and it will all be okay. Last time, I almost overdid it, after all. Now I've had 2 lovers, and he is still completely clueless. LOL. She was giggling at how much I loved and trusted her. I felt compelled to cleanse. After eating my meal, I went up and checked on Diana. She remained in front of the toilet on the floor. I got a washcloth and moistened it for her. She accepted it when I presented it to her and cleaned her lips. Do you think you might have the flu? Or did you eat something last night that disagreed with you? I think he'll be okay, Mark. It's just so brutal how he was killed. So, you did know him. According to the newspaper, he was also a serial cheater, and they are concerned that a pattern is emerging. They questioned his ex-wife, who said that it was just a matter of time until a jealous spouse caught up with him. I guess he had a long list of wronged husbands after him, too. Maybe the cops will shorten the list when they see any overlap between the 2. Say, you used to work with him too. Did you know anyone who both of them might have banged? Maybe you should call the cops, and she shut me off. I didn't know either of them well enough to know who they'd been with, she said, panicking. She composed herself and said, I couldn't be of any use to the police. Okay. But if you could help them find the killer with any little detail, you might be able to prevent another wife-stealing scum-sucker from being killed. Wait, maybe that's not such a bad thing. Killing off a few scum-suckers might send the right message to the rest of them. Do you know what I mean, babe? That's a terrible thing to say, Mark. No one deserves to die like that. Surely you're not defending these low-life, self-centered weasels, are you? I mean, if I thought for one quick minute that those scum suckers had had their way with you, well, all I can say is that they got off easy. ID have had to torture them for a while and let them know exactly why they deserve to die before ID let them enter the next world. No, of course, I'm not defending them. It just seems so unnecessarily brutal, that's all. If you're saying that you'd have made them suffer first, then you're scaring me, Mark. I've never known you to be violent like that. That's because no one has ever betrayed me like that before. And I truly hope you never have to find out just how much that thought upsets me. I've got to go to work. Do you think you'll go in? Or are you going to take today off? You'll be okay soon. I feel much better now. Well, you haven't gotten sick like that since you had Olivia. This isn't morning sickness, is it? I was joking. Or did I? There was no discussion of protection, and she hadn't used the pill since my vasectomy 12 years ago. Oh, wait. You need to have intercourse before you can get knocked pregnant. We haven't made love in almost 2 months. Wow. I had no idea it had been that long until I suddenly thought about it. It was Independence Day weekend, wasn't it? We'll have to fix that soon, babe. The shame on her face was as clear as glass. She had no idea she had me turned off for so long, given everything else that was going on. Actually, I had turned her off for a few weeks after I made my discovery. She just didn't recognize it. Gotta go. Hope you get to feeling better. See you. I left without even attempting a kiss, allegedly due to her vomiting, but really because I didn't want to smear my lips on her cheating face. I got my digs in and felt terrific again. Diana didn't stop giving me furtive glances until the following Thursday night, almost a week later. She must have eventually convinced herself that since they were both skirt-chasing slime suckers, it was only a coincidence that they were both murdered and castrated. Heck, the second murder may have been motivated by the first. Sunday morning came, as did our usual breakfast gathering. She was dreading it after the previous 2 Saturdays, but I eagerly anticipated it. As I arrived, she began immediately with, "You were late getting home from bowling last night." That's 2, or is it 3 weeks in a row? You're not doing anything you shouldn't, are you? Me? Do anything wrong? You've got to be kidding me. I'm as boring as looking at a picture of an albino cow in a blizzard. I wondered whether she recognized her own words. No, I had a great series last night, and it was enough to move us into first place. I bowled a 235, a 221, and then a 297. I was on fire. Paul had a great series as well, and the rest of the team did about what they normally do, and we moved into first place by 10 pins. We stayed a little while to celebrate. I'm sorry that I didn't call you first. Just think, if that last ball had curved a little the other way, you could have read about my first perfect game in the paper. Regarding the paper. Oh, there it is. She still gave me a few puzzled stares as I read. I opened it, and there in the center of page 1 was a photo from the murder site with a police spokesman assuring everyone that the culprit would be apprehended shortly. I studied the information and announced to Diana. The vengeful killer has struck again. That's what they're calling him now. It's definitely the same guy. They say this time the guy was parked in his car along the lake, in a popular makeout spot near the marina. This time, his tool was found tied to his hand. I lowered the paper to see the terror on her face. His name was Lucas Santos. She shrieked and dashed into our bedroom. I smirked again. After her second affair ended, she felt less sorrow, thus much less was written about how she made it up to me, because she didn't do anything at all. Her remarks were mostly on how nice the first several times were, and how shocked she was that she hadn't restrained herself and just did it once, as she had intended. The entries were sporadic again until late March, when yet another young guy focused his attention on my beloved wife. It only took him 14 days to convince her to meet him for lunch in his vehicle. He parked at a makeout place near the harbor, and they ate a fast lunch before making out, which reminded her of her youth. She hadn't been a makeout queen or a 304 in high school, but she did have her first 2 partners before graduation, so this wasn't her first visit here. By their third date, she had been taught how to recline the passenger seat so they could do it straight away, which they did. She only got off twice, but they were huge ones since the thought of someone catching them made it even more exciting. She tried her best to pull herself together for the afternoon at work, but she was worried that someone would notice. She double-checked herself as she drove back to work. Each time they spent time together, she noted his energy and passion throughout their interactions and started to question whether she appreciated the thrill of being more adventurous than she knew. After their 6th date, he mentioned that he had a particular taste for certain types of closeness. After they'd spent time together, he requested her to help him relax in an unusual manner, and she consented. However, the scenario turned unpleasant when his excitement grew a little too much, resulting in an unintended spill on her top. He quickly apologized and even provided wet wipes to assist clean off, but the mark remained. A similar occurrence happened at their next encounter, which caught her off guard and left her feeling embarrassed. She noticed the enormity of the mess later when making a brief stop in the restroom. When he made a similar request on another occasion, she attempted to prevent any more shocks by taking safeguards, but it appeared to detract from his fun. It dawned on her that his personal choice was an important component of his satisfaction. She ended their casual connection after realizing their interests and limits did not coincide. She wrote, "I have gotten away with it again, so I promise to be a better wife." Yeah, right. LOL. I've got the best of both worlds, a loving provider at home and a strange tool once or twice a year to beat the boredom. I'm just sorry that the romantic meetings and the courting part is over so quickly, because they really make me feel young and sexy. I wonder how long it will take me to find another lover. Naturally, I followed her once I finished my meal. There's no use in letting a perfectly nice breakfast go cold. When I walked in, she was trying to calm herself down after a bout of weeping. She heard me and glanced up. I saw complete horror in her eyes. Could she really believe that I was murdering off her lovers and that she may be next? If she was, I could only giggle quietly at her. I take it from your reaction that you knew the victim of last night's killing also? That's 3 for 3 with you. Why do you know all these cheating scum-suckers well enough to feel sorry for them? Why do you? I made it look like the light over my head had just flicked on for a second. Please tell me that you didn't have anything going on with these guys. I don't know how you could even think such a thing. Are you accusing me of what? Screwing around with those bums? Just what are you saying here, Mark? I assume she shifted gears much too quickly for this not to be deliberate. I'm not accusing you. I thought it to be one hell of a coincidence that you knew all 3 of the scum-suckers. I was just teasing you. I know that you love and respect me way too much to risk our wonderful years together over a few moments of forbidden pleasure with the likes of those cheating creeps. I was just surprised that you've known all 3 of them well enough to get upset about them. It's not them. It's how heinous the murders are. Then why didn't you get upset until after I read his name? You were sitting there completely composed until I said Lucas Santos. That's what put you over the edge. She glanced away. It was building up, and I was mentally pleading with God that it should be a total stranger this time. When I realized that my firm does business with his company and I've seen him in the office a few times, I guess I lost it. It's not that I knew him all that well, but that it happened to someone I know. I guess that makes sense. Maybe I should ask you, since you thought I might have been messing around with them, did you kill them? She lifted her head and looked into my eyes. My dear, I murmured, kissing the top of her head, if I thought you had been stepping out with one man, let alone 3 men, you wouldn't be sitting here asking me questions. I have to go. Bye. I strolled out of the room, knowing that the knife had been pushed in a little deeper and twisted somewhat further. I chuckled practically the whole way to work, repeating the scenarios in my mind. Diana waited for me to get home from bowling on Thursday night at 11:15 p.m. It was a little later than usual, but not the practically midnight arrivals of the previous weeks. Her nerves were on edge, so she couldn't sleep regardless. After all, 3 of her past boyfriends were assassinated over the last 3 Fridays as a result of their romances with her. Each was slain in the same area where they had slept her, and castrated, with their instruments representing their own obsession. Ethan, who was verbally rude to the cucked spouse, had his tool pushed into his mouth. Nathan had his tool up his buttocks. Carlos, who loved the HJ, had his tool tied to his hand. Add to that the detectives suspected it was the act of a jealous spouse. Like hers. Diana examined me attentively as I walked in the door. I had alcohol on my breath but no blood on my clothing. What are you still doing up, dear? You're usually fast asleep by now. Do you have a guilty conscience? Did you spend too much on clothing this week? I requested an explanation. No, I didn't spend too much this week on anything. I had a little indigestion, that's all. How was your bowling tonight? I'd really rather not talk about it, I complained. I've got an early meeting tomorrow, so I'm off to bed. Within 10 minutes, she assumed I was sleeping like a baby. She felt it was hilarious that I would name it that, given that she imagined I had discovered her indiscretions and was chasing down my former loves on Fridays when I was supposed to be bowling and murdering them. But if I did know, why didn't I confront her? Why hadn't I thrown her out or called her a 304? It's as if I slid into another personality that knew and murdered but didn't realize it existed for the rest of the time. It just didn't make sense. He doesn't seem any different than usual. I'm sure he doesn't know. He can't know and sleep like that. It would be killing him, eating away at his very soul if he knew. I can't act any different or let on in any way about my little flings. I must be brave. She laid over and closed her eyes, trying to get some rest. Just as she settled down, I fidgeted and mumbled nearly incoherently. Die, scumsucker, die? Her eyes were wide open at this point, and she knew sleep would be a long time coming. I was facing away from her, eyes closed, with a large sneer on my face. Sunday morning arrived, and Diana seemed to have been up all night. But Mark was as fresh as a daisy. The leaves have almost fully fallen off the trees. They took their seats at the table, and she asked him again. How was your bowling last night, dear? I told you that I'd rather not talk about it. But if you insist, I said. I did terrible, and we slipped back into second place. My low game was actually an 187. We had a team meeting about it to see where I could improve, that's all. I'm sorry to hear that. I know how much you enjoy bowling. You'll do better next week, I'm sure of it. She sat at the table, and I remarked, Geez, you look like you didn't sleep a wink all night. Are you feeling okay? I told you. I had some indigestion last night, honey. It might have been something you ate. You better watch what you eat. If it keeps bothering you, you might have to call Dr. Franklin. He'll keep an eye on it, okay? Now, let's see what's in the news this morning. I picked up the paper, and she waited impatiently for the possibility of another victim of the furious killer, because, darn it, she had had another affair. As the tension rose, I remained mute for a few seconds. I broke the stillness just as she was certain there had been no murders the night before. Well, it happened again. Another man found dead in his office, naked across his desk. This time, his unit was found laying in the middle of his chest, pointed at his mouth. What do you make of that, dear? I'm sure that I don't know what it could mean. Why would you even ask me that? Because I know that your company worked with his company just a few months ago, so I'm sure you met the man. His name is Andrew Mitchell. Diana collapsed and slowly slipped from her chair to the floor. I chuckled as I saw her fall. I completed my meal as if everything was completely normal. I walked over her withered corpse to get the remaining piece of bacon. My thoughts returned to another portion of her journal, where she described how her business had won a bid for the Foster account, and that she would serve as the project's liaison. She wondered hopefully whether she might meet her next boyfriend there. It seems that she will wind up with the boss' son, Daniel, the vice president of marketing, in her stable. She revealed how she chose him despite the fact that he was the oldest of her boyfriends, at 35 years old, a full 8 years younger than me, as opposed to the prior two, who were decades younger. She informed him that he was a huge flirt, but she was certain that they could work out something mutually beneficial. He answered by closing his office door and sweeping all of the papers off the top of his desktop with a single swoop of his arm. How romantic. They hugged one another with unbridled passion, rapidly removing their garments in a blur of movement. She sat on the edge of his desk as they hugged tightly, their emotions flowing high. He carefully placed her on the desk, and they kissed with the intensity of two people who had been apart for much too long. Their time ended abruptly, but he soothed her with a teasing promise of a second round shortly. He was correct. But rather than screwing her, he did it between her jugs. She complained about having to reapply her cosmetics, but not to her boyfriend. She met with him many times a week, but they could only have special meetings once a week when they could exclude the rest of the business. They had the office all to themselves just before lunchtime. After their fourth secret meeting, she was so weary of dealing with the mess he had created that she informed him they had to cease if it occurred again. He stated that it was his preferred method of ending things and often the only way he felt pleased, so she should accept it or risk his informing her husband. She responded by threatening to notify his wife, and their affair came to an end. She said that her favorite aspect of their flirtation was their first amorous encounter, which she really enjoyed. She reasoned that she might have more of the romance by having a series of one-night stands, say, one each month. Then she stated it was too hazardous since this was a small city, and if she had that many partners, it would eventually come back to me. And she did not want to terminate her marriage, as sooner or later, I would grow bored of these flings, and then I would need and want only Mark to take care of me for my golden years. Her outburst went on to imply that she was the best wife I deserved. After all, I have had 4 flings and ended them without Mark having a single clue. He doesn't pay any attention to me anymore, so I have to get it somewhere. I wonder who my next lover will be. Maybe someone with a British accent. Wouldn't that be sexy and romantic? Maybe he would look kind of like Brad Pitt. I almost can't wait to see who it will be. Diana gently awoke on the kitchen floor. When she noticed the newspaper as she rose to sit in her chair, she realized why she was there. That makes 4 ex-lovers. She was genuinely done with old loves. Where was Mark? How long had she been out? Did he just leave her there and go to work? That would imply that he had lost all affection for her, and that he needed to know about her flings. Just then, Mark entered the kitchen with a wet washcloth and handed it to her. How long was I out? Only long enough for me to get a wet cloth for you. It seems that you're 4 for 4 on his victims now. It's looking like one hell of a coincidence, isn't it, baby? And that's all it is. A coincidence. Are you sure that you don't know anything that could help the cops find the killer? I'm sure they'd be very grateful, I jokingly said. I'm sure that I don't know anything. Just leave me alone. Calm down. I was just kidding with you. If you can't take a joke, you're going to have one hell of a time putting up with me in our retirement. You need to make an effort too. It's not like you'll be spending your golden years with Brad Pitt. As I went for work, I stroked her on the top of her head, grinning the whole time. Diana had been exhausted from a lack of sleep and jumpy all week. She became agitated by every unexpected noise. Even the furnace turned on once. Mark had been acting perfectly normal, except for the fact that he hadn't initiated sex in the previous 5 weeks. 1 week before her old loves met tragic deaths. After he went for work on Thursday, she started to think about everything. Could he know about my affairs? She worried. She knew him to be a passionate guy from their time together. There's no way he'd do nothing if he knew. He'd confront me, or I'd come home and find all my clothes on the front lawn. Maybe he's gathering evidence, and he only suspects something. If he only suspected, then why has he been hinting that I might know something and that I should go to the cops, especially if he could be involved in their deaths? None of this makes any sense. I just wish I knew what was going on in his head. One thing is for sure. I'm following him to that damn bowling alley tonight, just to make sure. Just then, her mobile phone rang. It was Victor Harper, her current boyfriend. Hey sexy, I'm really looking forward to tonight. Is he still on for bowling? Yes, he is, but I'm not sure meeting tonight is a good idea. I feel like he knows more than he's letting on. Maybe we should cool it for a while. I'm sure you're just overthinking it. If it makes you feel better, well, make sure he goes bowling before we hang out. I'll watch for him to leave, pick you up, and well follow him to the alley. Once he's inside, we'll head back and enjoy ourselves. You know you're excited to spend time together again. I guess you're right, Marcus. I was thinking along the same lines. Her better judgment was overwhelmed by the notion of how powerful his large instrument felt. This would be their 6th encounter, which had coincided with Mark discovering her journal, and it showed no indications of slowing down. The romance was past, but the pleasure of being utterly pleased by his monster far outweighed any regrets over missing it. She wished she had discovered a larger instrument sooner, since the sex was really mind-blowing. He usually leaves about 5:45, so be down the block by 5:30. I can't wait. Lover, she said in a breathy tone. He'll be there, baby. Don't you worry your sweet butt about that. As soon as I see him pull away, he'll move to the end of your driveway. When you get to the car, we'll be able to take off after him. He won't recognize my car, so we won't have to follow too far behind him. It's a date. I can't wait to get you back where you belong. I can't wait either. See you tonight. They followed him to the alley as planned, and he casually strolled inside, unconscious of what was going on. They waited across the street for a few minutes to see if he came back out, but he didn't, so they ran back to her home. Hurry, lover, she said. I want you to screw me in his bed. That stupid fool has no clue about us, and it turns me on to do it right under his nose and not get caught. He's so clueless. I knew he was stupid to let a hot babe like you out of his sight. You deserve better than a man who ignores you to go bowling, of all things. They were so heated that garments started falling off as soon as they entered the home. 90 minutes later, a well-screwed Diana decided it was time to clean up and climbed into the shower. When she emerged, she gasped at the sight before her. Marcus was still laying in bed, with a huge knife poking out of his chest. His dead eyes stared to the ceiling. Blood is on the sheets. A small, nerdy guy was putting what seemed to be fishing line around the base of Marcus' large unit. He spoke gently. I'm trying to keep it big for you, Diana. I know how much you love it, as I heard you proclaim so many times this evening. It is so big that I just didn't have the heart to cut it off like the others. She fainted. When she awoke, she was lying on her back on the bed, nude, with Marcus' somewhat deflated huge unit within her again and Marcus' crushing weight. He was 64 and 245 pounds on top of her. Her wrists and ankles were bound together with linen strips. She couldn't move and had her panties in her mouth. I apologize for not introducing myself earlier, but you passed out before I could. My name is Dean Wright, he said in a calm, spooky Peter Lorre-like tone. I met your husband many years ago when I was in the hospital. He was visiting a sick friend, and I was under the doctor's care, shall we say. You see, I was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, or as laymen call it, I'm a sociopath. I was beginning to torture animals, and my parents took me to the shrink, and they put me in there. I was not making any progress until Mark came that day and showed me how to be a nice guy and the benefits of being one. We became fast friends, and he visited me often, with my shrink's blessing. I can honestly say that it was because of Mark that I was rehabilitated enough to be released back into society. And until recently, my APD has never been a problem. I got a good job when I got out of school and got transferred to California, where I was doing quite well for myself. Then my cheating 304 wife left me, and my job was eliminated in a merger. I came back here to stay with my parents after my cash ran out. It was a bad time for me, but I still dealt with my problems like a normal man. 4 weeks ago today, I was in a bowling alley, listening to a band, when I saw my friend and savior Mark sitting at the bar, looking like someone just ran over his dog and stomped on his heart. Which, basically, you did. After some cajoling, he told me the whole story of finding your diary that day and reading it, about your 4 affairs. And he added that a 5th one may have started that very day. I was totally aghast. There's no way a nice guy like Mark deserves such treatment. I vowed that he would be avenged, and he would never know anything about who was doing it or why. His karma would be untouched, and it would seem like those scum suckers' karma had caught up with him. I consoled him, and then probed him for more information, like that he bowled every Thursday night and where he found your diary. I broke into your house and read your diary that next day while you both were at work. I made a copy and used all the information in it to track down and plot revenge on those scumbags that felt they could screw another man's wife and get away with defiling a marriage. I killed one of your lovers each Thursday night for the last 4 weeks, while Mark was bowling, so he'd have 20 or 30 witnesses for his alibi. Since each of these inglorious weasels was a serial cheater, I figured the cops wouldn't be able to figure out which wronged husband did it because the list would be quite long for each one, and at best only 50 to 60% complete. The nice part of being a sociopath is that I don't have the conscience that most killers have, which causes them to be less than perfect in their crime. Their subliminal guilt often makes them leave a clue. Tonight, I will take a life for the last time. When I leave, I will switch on your ceiling fan. Pay attention to the cloth string tied to one of its blades. I've calculated that it will spin for nearly 6 minutes, long enough for the string to unwind from the cardboard roll and pull those papers off your nightstand onto the space heater, sparking a fire. If the authorities investigate, they will find no trace of the string. It will burn away completely, along with the evidence binding you to this fool. They will assume you and this idiot accidentally knocked the papers onto the heater and were overcome by the smoke, failing to react in time. So tonight, you will die knowing that your flagrant indiscretions have caused the deaths of 5 complete jerks that knowingly screwed a married woman. And yourself, an unrepentant cheating 304. I read your diary, and you really are a piece of shit. You know that? I can only imagine that Mark has been enjoying the news over the past few weeks. After all, each week, someone he knows who wronged him got what was coming to them. Har har har. I should apologize for the bad pun, but honestly, I don't care what you think of me. I just hope he'll agree with my decision that you meet your end. After all, he's much better off without someone so unworthy as a wife. We can all agree on that. He stood up and approached the door of their bedroom. It's time to bid you adieu, as the upper floor needs to be ablaze before someone calls the fire department. And I wouldn't want Mark to come home early and unknowingly call before all my evidence burns away and you die. So goodbye, 304. He switched the wall switch to turn on the fan, and she heard the rear door shut a few seconds later. She panicked as she noticed the thread unraveling. She fought to pull Marcus off of her, and her arms moved barely little. She started to cry for aid, but the underwear in her mouth kept her from being heard. 6 minutes later, just as Hugh warned, the fire broke out and smoke filled the room. As the smoke filled her lungs, she saw the brightness fade into darkness as she passed out for the last time. Mark was on his way home, thinking how bizarre it was that just as he resolved to get proof of her indiscretions, and use it publicly against her in the divorce, someone began murdering her lovers. He grieved what it would do to his children, but she had to pay for her misdeeds and her complete lack of regard for him. If all of them died, she had to be wondering if I did it, and if she was next. It had to be freaking her out. She exhibited evidence of it. With that concept in mind, he returned home to see fire engines extinguishing the fire at his house. Of course, the police first looked closely at Mark, but there were so many individuals supporting his alibi, as well as surveillance footage from the bowling alley. The lover's manhood remained intact, so they couldn't relate it to the other crimes. They were comprehensive enough to examine his finances over the previous several years and concluded that he lacked the funds to engage someone to undertake these tasks. They investigated the locations of his close friends and family during the killings but discovered nothing. Mark even agreed to take a lie detector test and passed with flying colors. Due to the emotional turmoil he was experiencing, Mark never linked Hugh's APD to the potential that he was the famed vengeance murderer. Hugh moved back into town, and Mark was single, so they got closer. Hugh confessed to his buddy 30 years later, when his disease was nearing the end of its course. Mark bought him a drink. The cases are still open, and that is how karma came full circle, twisted, harsh, and unavoidable. Was it justice, or just another kind of crime? Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell for more tales.